Welcome to the Modern Hippie Podcast, where we'll be exploring all of my favorite boundary-pushing people and topics surrounding consciousness, psychedelics, mental performance, functional medicine, living in alignment, and so much more. I'm your host, Barrett Perlman, a former pro wakeboarder turned body worker, energy healer, and well, a modern hippie. And I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Modern Hippie Podcast. Today is my first episode of something I'm calling micro-dose episodes because A, very appropriate with mushrooms, and B, it is exactly that. It is a micro-dose of information, of something I would like to share with you about a thought I'm having right now or that's going around in my field, my curriculum, as I like to call it, where everything that's kind of happening in my life has a lesson to it, just like in school where curriculum comes from. So right now my curriculum that I'd like to share with you is about the grace frequency and beginning to accept what is. And that's kind of exactly what grace is. You think of the giving of grace, or to be graceful to yourself as you're going through something. And it's this idea that instead of judging it, or instead of having this duality of right versus wrong, it just is this acceptance of what is. And in that acceptance, we can really relax. I mean, it gets you out of duality, which is beautiful in and of itself, because while yes, there are things that are like feminine and masculine, the idea really of this world is that everything blends together. You rarely run into something that is so like this way or this way. That's not really how this earth, this consciousness was created. There's blends. And you see it, for instance, in the animal kingdom with sexuality. They have like a spectrum of how the animals interact with each other between homosexuality and heterosexuality and everything in between. So I love this idea of the grace frequency, that it's a loving, giving frequency that we give not only to ourselves but to others, that gets rid of that desire, gets rid of that necessity to be right or wrong, and instead just accept what is. When you can apply that then to your life, to situations in it, you begin to have more of a beautifully colored experience, because now something that happened to you isn't just this awful thing that happened to you, but perhaps it's, well, my car broke down. And so maybe there's a lesson here. Maybe there's something that I should be learning or someone I should be meeting now because the car broke down. Perhaps you got a raise at your job and it's great, but perhaps there are other things that come with that. I'd really like to look at the grace frequency as it applies to relationships specifically. For example, my partner and I, he just recently moved to another city. And both of us sat down and talked about it, and we're like, neither one of us wanted to be in a long distance relationship. We both came to the table being like, that is not what I had in mind. But yet, here we find ourselves. And neither one of us is that interested in letting go of the relationship either. And so now it becomes a conversation of, okay, well, this is our circumstance. And so now how do we make that work? And you begin to see where the radical acceptance of it, instead of fighting it, can now bring us to a place of looking for ways to negotiate and co-create how that looks good and feels good to us. And I think a lot in relationships, people can tend to want to be right about something, or certainly not want to be wrong. Like our egos hate to be wrong. But there's a lot of beautiful work you can do around surrendering to the idea that there just isn't wrong or right. There just is. And as you can radically begin to accept what is, it deepens your ability to love, for starters, especially as it pertains to the parts inside of us. It's getting away from those parts being right or wrong as well, and instead just allowing them to be what is. And then you get to give them grace, and you get to give them more love and more compassion. And now all of a sudden your existence becomes much more integrated. And so I see so many ways that this grace can be applied to everything in our lives as we radically accept what is. And from there, we can decide how to create something moving forwards. So sit on that one, my fellow modern hippies, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and review this podcast wherever you're listening. I'm so grateful to have you on this journey with me. Until next time.